Welcome to From the Left. My name is Stephen Leon. Thank you to the GCD Network for hosting this live stream. I'm running for Congress here in Virginia's 8th District, and I'm going to just go ahead and go over some of the things during the week, tie into some policy stuff, and I'll see how time kind of flies through, per usual. So, I guess one of the DNC convention was this week, and the name of the show is From the Left, so it's important that I check my biases and really not just that, but also listen to the right. And I was listening. I tuned in usually 10 minutes before my show starts, and I hear the person before me, and I kind of hear what's going on, and just kind of seems like you're missing 25% of that. Maybe I'll tie some of that in there. Just a couple of there's like a dot or two, a dot and a half that you're missing some things. But I recognize the issues that we have, and if we can even blame politicians or what have you. But let me get into that. So the DNC convention. So before we look at the hype, I recently discovered PolitiFact. I added that to my media literacy section on my website, leonforcongress.us, and that checks both sides. And you can see where Biden, Kamala, Waltz, how they some half truths there, especially with medication, things like that. Check it out, PolitiFact. I'll go ahead and you can just do your own homework. You know what I mean? I can sit here and rehash everything that you see in mainstream media, or rather just kind of empower you to do that independent research on your own. This independence is, well, the word itself is kind of interpreted just to be independent. Some things we're entirely independent. We don't want to be codependent on anything. We're interdependent even. So Kennedy dropped out, and well, he sort of dropped out. I think I looked it up. He so much as where he's going to get his name off some of the ballots. I think the swing states. Like that. And I haven't really been paying much attention to Kennedy. The guy started off as a Democrat, then went independent. Now he's leaning right, and Trump's far right. I guess after the assassination attempt, he's trying to get more in the middle of things, but he's just like the rest of them. He's lying about stuff, just appeasing corporations. You know what I mean? He doesn't acknowledge with his tariff plan and taxes on how that eventually gets to the consumer from imports. He did that the same thing in his when he was president, and that really squandered big tech, advanced nuclear technology. That kind of put a pause on some of that stuff, and we need advanced nuclear technology. And he just doesn't think it through. And if he does, again, he's just appeasing corporations. He's appeasing big oil. He's appeasing all that stuff. So the just more thing. I caught. I'm not going to listen to like 2-3 hours of what Kennedy's saying, and but I did catch some of it. And he's talking about banning toxic foods and things like that. That I understand. I always read my labels. Sometimes I want something sweet. Sometimes we don't really know. In the 80s, they told us that fat was making us fat, so they took all the fat out of everything. They put a bunch of sugar and everything, and then towards the end of the last century, everyone's fat. You know what I mean? And because of all the sugar, and that's just science. You know what I mean? It's trial and error. And but as far as banning toxic foods, when it comes to, let's say, partially hydrogenated fats, your bodies aren't very good at processing that. It's mostly used to preserve. It's been banned in Europe. I think New York State has a ban on it now. And that's the thing about it. You can create partially hydrogenated fats by even saturated fat. You can do it with any type of fat. If you know about fats and the poly chains and the mono chains and the saturated fats and the good fats, even with olive oil, if you heat it up enough, you're going to make it hydrogen. So it just the body doesn't process it very well. So alcohol is toxic in certain amounts. You know what I mean? I wish that they would make that label, a little bit more conducive to where it just says the Surgeon General warning. We're all familiar with what it says, but if it added something like I put language out this about somewhere where you could drinking in excess can cause a lot of mental and physical problems. Alcohol is one of the only drugs next to benzodiazepines that you can die from its withdrawals. It takes a little while. It's a calorie source, so it's very toxic. You know what I mean? So to ban toxic foods, you know what I mean? It's like we have an FDA, so just getting into that empathy of people, and he's spitting out numbers of mental health and things like that. And sure, some of those numbers have gone up. Part of that is just natural. Some of that, wow, kids can get misdiagnosed. People can get misdiagnosed. You know what I mean? There are, big pharma or just any pharma can, in a way, lobby to doctors. You can't receive a direct gift, prescribe stuff, but they can certainly help you promote the drug or give you other incentives. That's the way the law's set up now. So, I mean, even then, it's like, was it like red dye or something like that, or GMOs? You know what I mean? How that was affects certain people or not, and it's just that's just what it's like to be in America. That's what it's like to have those free choices. If those foods are toxic or enough or not, and if there are parents that just don't know any better, and maybe we need to update the food pyramid, the food labels, and things like that. Dr. Atkins had come up with an interesting thing. It's funny, he innovated the idea of low carbs, and then he died from some heart condition. But he was onto something, you know what I mean? So there's like a balance. Some days, I'll work out and I'll have a high carb day or a low carb day and just watch that. But it's really hard not to eat carbs, and just the way that the body processes them. And if you look at the history of our omnivorous diets and things like that, and so I just think it's just his character. That is Kennedy's character. It's to alienate you. It's like, I don't want to dive into his personal matters too much, but if you just kind of see some of the things that he's been through, and it's just how things in his life are misplaced personally to where he thinks he can solve the world's problems, but he can't really solve his own per se. And it's like, wow, especially when it came to he's a medicines propagandist when COVID came through and what he would have done differently. And it's like the world never knew about a pandemic before. And had the comparisons that he made to what George Washington even mandated, vaccines and things like that. So it's just people don't do their history on things, and they just make it up or just to have an opinion on something. You know what I mean? It's like, God, you're not going to be able to ban toxic foods. I mean, sure, you're not going to swallow ether. You know what I mean? Like everything in moderation. You know what I mean? It's like that. No one's going to get rid of their cupcakes. You can't live off cupcakes. That would be very toxic. Okay. And that's the challenge. I went through that with my son. You know what I mean? He would want to. I was in my 30s. I was on a huge health kick, and just I'm 43 now, so my body's a little bit different, and just how I processed foods, and just knew everything that I could possibly study. You go to selfdata.com and things like that, and check in every calorie. Now I can just guesstimate, looking at an orange and tell you what the nutrition profile of it is. And but anyway, so like I'd always like feed that into him, and the kid just wants a cupcake. So yeah. So the taxing tips is neat. Google around on that, and you see. I served plenty of tables when I was younger, and all managers tell us not to claim all our cash tips. You know what I mean? I've talked to other people about that, and it's the same. There's a reason why managers themselves tell us that. And then you can do about the credit tips. And we should pay our taxes too. But that's just what are you gonna do? I doubt the IRS is going to come after me for saying that when everybody's doing it. But if you look into it, that's a good thing. It's not just servers, that would also go for Uber drivers and other things. And but if you look at what some economists are saying about that, where that's going to take away some tax revenues over time in the billions. So what do you do then? Is it just platitudes? Again, just appeasing your general empathy, and then whether you're solving it to 10, 20, 30%, even if at all, just have something to get. I don't understand that, when it comes to, I've done a lot of research on the way that politics in this country are. Like in the early days, the founders didn't believe in debates, and they're part of the revolution in the print press. And you'd see their name, you know who they were. You know what I mean? But there weren't televisions or things like that. And just the way that it's evolved. I mentioned that Daisy ad and how that's when TVs were in, and now we got social media and things like that. So, just looking at personalities and who can just like sit there or stand there with a poker face, either Biden or Trump. You know what I mean? It's pretty alien. It's stupid. Is what it is. It's go off the data, go off the facts. Um, so yeah, but if we were to do the no taxing for tips, then we would want to offset that somehow. One thing that I discovered is taxing big data. Data is the most valuable asset to corporations. That's how they find new ways to sell you stuff. Of course, there's intellectual property mixed in there too, but it's a way to get into consumers' heads and find out and anticipate what they might want. And you can talk into your phone or whatever, and if you got a stomach ache, next thing you know, Pepto Bismol shows up. You know what I mean? So, but if we tax that data, Google that, and you'll discover how much money these are essentially converting electrons into pennies, and it's an international thing. So you'd have to consider those options, and then, but if you look at how much revenue that could bring in, not taxing consumers on that, taxing big data, and of course, again, you'd have to go after those executives, and if you do that, they're going to try and I don't remember when the internet first came about, like really became big in the late 90s. People were like, well, why have advertisements if I'm paying for my subscription? You know what I mean? I'm paying my ISP. Why do I need to have ads on there? And I remember early on, I was like, well, there should be some law for that. I mean, you pay for cable television. If you have ads, it's for ads, for stuff that's related to that channel or whatever. But that's just what they do. So that's why price gouging mitigation would work. And what is a proper ratio? How do you break up those monopolies? That's what it comes down to, having competition. And at the end of the day, in this country, it's about giving that CEO their salary. I can look on anywhere on the right or the left, and I think I saw something on Tucker Carlson's, something about there was on his social media feed, and where there was something about some horror stories about lobbying and big pharma and stuff like that. Okay, well then go after the chief executives. And if you go after the chief executives, then you're going to probably hear the name Bernie. And then the opposition to that is Trump. And yet if you were to go after CEOs, then they're the ones that provide the jobs. If you go after corporations and if you give them tax breaks, that means more money down the road for everybody. No, it doesn't. You know what I mean? What happened out of COVID was price gouging to make up for the loss of demand. People are shut in, and unfortunately, we weren't set up for that. We weren't. There were lots of leaders in the world, not political leaders, that were getting the government to be prepared for that. There was an Obama playbook that Trump had thrown away. Google it; it's there. There was a way. There's a germ team that the Gates Foundation has started. It's expensive, but it would find a way. Like, we're not ready for the next pandemic, but this could have been the last pandemic. And he isolated quick enough. And I work in intellectual property law. I've said this before. Those patents were filed 2 weeks after shutdown. You know what I mean? And then that went through processes. They pushed it through the FDA and the trials and everything like that. And unfortunately, there are some people that aren't going to respond well to the vaccine. And nobody knew who it was going to be. And if we hadn't done anything, then we don't know how that was going to mutate. If you look at the Spanish flu, that directly affected more people died from the Spanish flu in the 1920s that were in their 20s, and this one affected the elderly, right? So, man, maybe that's partly because people in their 20s are just out and about mixing it up, and it just attacked their immune system so much, So, yeah, to really think about, like, you can't just blame the system or biology, or just be ignorant to it, and then to just start feeding your way down into blaming the deep state and all this stuff. It's pretty delusional. It's just a big game of deflection, into solving the real problems is what it comes down to. Yeah, the big thing you keep seeing, really what people want to see is the prices of things to be affordable. We want, and there's no other way to do it. It's with price gouging. and to find that proper balance without hindering progress or competition. And you can see different cases from the Soviet Union to Venezuela and things like that. How do they do it? Where do they get it wrong? And even if we came up with a certain parameter, like we have antitrust laws and things like that. And again, it really comes down. If price gouging isn't going to work for you, then you're going to have to look at CEO salary caps. You're going to have to look at that. That doesn't mean that you're holding a certain company or corporation can't make a certain amount of money. It's those executives themselves. They're the ones at the end of the day who set the prices. They're the ones at the end of the day to set the wages. And they're the ones who are buying out our government. So you really got to look at those things. They're buying out both left and right. You know what I mean? Look at the Inflation Reduction Act. The incumbent here, he's using that. The guy doesn't show up for work. Is what he's doing. He's campaigning. If you know what's going on, there have been Princeton studies on this where 70% of their time is spent campaigning, PAC money, super PAC money, lobbyist bundles, and just out there tap dancing, and only having at the end of the day a 30% efficacy. And the opposition is met with that if it's fossil fuels or green tech or whatever it is. And it's just it's corporations. It's the corporations buying out our government. Look at that Inflation Reduction Act. There are 2,000 different companies, unique organizations that lobby that. And it had no direct broad scope or short or long-term impact on inflation itself. Consumer price gouge consumer spending is what drove us out of COVID. And when the incumbent over here, Don Beyer, he just pushes that out. And aside from all the facts and all the media bias and everything like that, it's like, oh man, it's just it's unbelievable. So, and you have to imagine my struggle. You have to imagine that I'm sitting on the left here and I call out those from the left. I remember someone signed, I'll never forget it, when I just mentioned the American Anti-Corruption Act in my platform, when she just saw that word corruption, I'm never going to forget how she just stood there, looked at me. She was getting ready to sign the petition and then just walked away. Just the fact that somebody said corruption in complete denial or ignorant to it. I doubt that she would, I don't know, geez, what if she was a lobbyist herself and thought that her job would be at stake if she had signed that or whatever? K Street's a pretty big deal. It's not our federal institutions that are the problem. Sure, there could be some reformation. It's not the Department of Education. It's not the DA. It's just, there could be some reformation again, but it's the corporations buying out of government, and it's nothing more. It's nothing less. And they're just going to come up with whatever narratives, and just look at the lobbying profile in a bill. Look at the capital trades. You can see candidates and incumbents what they're invested in, and it goes on and on. It's just getting worse. This is one of the worst Congresses we've ever had, the 118th, and it sucks. When we get things like climate change and it's crazy. The guy before had mentioned something about what struck me most about what he was saying about the oceans and how the oceans absorb carbon. It's its natural filter. Again, you're missing a point. There's only so much that the ocean can absorb, and then that's where part of climate change is going to come from. That's where we're going to see stronger hurricanes and things like that. Coral reefs are going to die. That's going to create a domino effect. So yeah, the ocean. You displace oil and fossil fuel. We drill it and then we burn it in the atmosphere, and then it rests in the ocean. There's only so much that it can contain in its composition. Then it starts it's going to, we have to sequester that. And then the cool thing about sequestering carbon from the oceans is the byproduct of that is hydrogen. So that's what I was saying, where he's missing a point. And we can still drill oil to some degree, but it's probably better just to recycle it. You know what I mean? Like, if this is kind of wild, if you think of fossil fuels are the only known element. Well, it's not an element, but if it's the only known source it comes from deceased life, right? And we don't know of any other planet that has life. So wouldn't that be more valuable than diamonds? You can find diamonds on other planets, and uranium and platinum and all this other stuff, but not fossil fuel. So based on that, shouldn't fossil fuel be pretty rare, but as a commodity. Don't you think that? Um, so, and there's a lot of danger with fracking and things like that when it comes to the how much to use to procure for our uses. So you have to consider that. I'm a big proponent of advanced nuclear technology, third, fourth generation reactors. The fourth generation TerraPower specifically utilizes depleted uranium. There's 300 or 400 years worth of depleted uranium sitting in Kentucky alone. And as some of our weapons become inoperable as weapons, the uranium depletes, then you can use that for fuel, and we don't need to make weapons out of it. So I hear Vivek Ramaswamy say that the nuclear family is the strongest family. It's just a form of tyranny. You know how much money we spend on nuclear weapons that we're never going to use for each other? It's just a stupid game going back and forth. They have to forgive me. I'm feeling a little sloshy this evening. This whole week, the weather's been a little bit cooler. I'm just kind of on a monotone. I wish I could have been more energetic tonight. But I even wanted to do my little. I have like 4 points on the incumbent here when it comes to, I don't even have the energy to do it right now. I've said it 1,000 times on social media, where he's doubled his net worth to 124 million. He's one of the most prolific stock traders in the house. He's pledged big money is the problem. It's always campaigned with it. Goes back to college during one of the worst U.S. Congresses in the history of our country. You know what I mean? Studying AI with no positions on how to protect jobs from AI. I came up with something that's on my platform. Check it out. Just look for Information Technology and Artificial Intelligence Act. You can just press Control F. So that's how a website works. Look for a key term. Look for something, or just take the time to read it. How long is it going to take to read a website? Not very long. Yeah, I'm pretty tired. I've got about 8 minutes. Let's just go ahead and, I spend some time going on social media. Doesn't consume my whole day. I don't know. I think on any given day, I maybe spend a total of 2 or 3 hours. Do I have to sign in, or is it going to bring me right there? Some of the things I say to people, it's the same stuff over and over again. And it's either media literacy or something fact-based that somebody didn't get right on the left or the right. Right now, it's really going after the Inflation Reduction Act. When that incumbent over here, I hate him. I hate Don Beyer. I do it with a passion. It's just how he decides to go back to school too. You already have a 30% efficacy, then you go back to school. Now you have a 17%, and the guy's an aristocrat. You know what I mean? That's a loose definition to describe him. He's privileged. He said himself. He's appeasing corporations. He's not an aristocrat. He made his fortune off of selling fossil fuel burning cars. I don't know. Here's something I say to Trump. He's Kamala Harris was the leader of banning fracking in the United States, and blah 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 blah. Donald Trump suggested nuking hurricanes, and I say that to people. And there's an Axios article, and people are like, the Axios is fake news. No, it's not. It's credited. You know what I mean? If you look at the media bias chart, again on my website on the media literacy section, if you go there and you see like who's just rated at the top there, and these outlets, they find sources and they check and balance them and they put it out there. Now he's just rampant where you got someone like Tucker on X, and he's the guy got fired. He was the fall guy over there at Fox News after that big lie of the election, and then still got a ton of followers. And it's stupid. So is this. Garbage Pail Kids, John Bomb, slang, and excuse me, in the UK is Trump means farts. So there's kind of few meanings in there. It's just stupid stuff. Don Beyer went to had a great time in Chicago, the DNC, and tomorrow I looked at the schedule for George Mason, and it goes back to school tomorrow. I mean, you should look at the videos. I've sent him withdrawal paperwork. I mean, you can't tell me he doesn't read this stuff. You can't tell me that he doesn't look at it. I mean, like, you're gonna post stuff and you don't listen, you don't read the comments. You know, check that. This is what I was talking about earlier. This will tell you what's true and what isn't after fact checking. I have fun, silly little pop culture references. This is one of my favorite go-tos. On J6, writers on behalf of at real Donald Trump search for the source of corruption, only to find the same corporate greed, which they were appeasing, because the Potomac fever is not just a metaphor to describe the denial of Don Byers' fever. Don Byers on the record to say Potomac fever. I've always wanted to get into politics. And then drain the swamp is not something the swamp is not something that Trump invented. The author of that book, The Swamp, go look at the HBO documentary, The Swamp. And, I do this, you want to say that the Republican Party is that of faith and religion. Well, he promised to, if that's the narrative you want to spin for Amendment 1, for the entirety of Amendment 1, he promised to drain the swamp, staged fake Matthew 21:12 reenactment on J6. Go look at Matthew 21:12. What was that? What were they searching for? They're looking for corruption, and they were media literate, and it's not an endorsement. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I read some things like, when I put music, I can't be a fan. They're not endorsing me. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I get a little vulgar. This is a big one. Trump says if you think things are expensive now, they will get 100 times worse if Kamala gets 4 years as president. Under her plan, Kamala will implement Soviet-style price control. She will abolish private health care to make California's ridiculous tax policy the law of the land. Just a massive. And I told Trump to go fuck himself, because he couldn't find balance to zoom off a cliff playing Mario Kart. You know what that reference is, right? Everything's about to get. Look at this article that I said. That's from Wired.com. Everything's about to get a hell of a lot more expensive due to climate change. So there's probably no way that you could even price gouge that when things are going to happen to agriculture. And here he is talking about drill baby drill and all this other stuff, and his tax policies and how that's eventually going to cost the consumer more. And again, just appeasing corporations. Yes, the left does that too, but not as much as Trump does. And no one is going to talk about that on the left or the right, because they're going to want to appease them, or they're in denial about it. I don't appease corporations. Oh, I love going after this hypocrite too. Elon Musk, he's a free speech hypocrite. You know what I mean? You can't advocate free speech. Not all free speech is protected, even in the United States. He's got multi-immigrant status and all this stuff. And it's just a bunch of, it's just kind of something. I never know when somebody's going to pick up on my campaign. So as long as I'm actively posting, even if it's like the same 10 things, no matter what it is, because that's basically what it's come down to. I have a response ready to go for every single thing. It's like being a quarterback. Every play, right? Every single thing. And if I don't know a particular topic, just Google it, check 3 or 4 different sources, find out what the balance is, and move on. You don't really know what those balances are. I find Washington Post, The Hill, and Wall Street Journal. That's from left to right. Those are my 3 favorites. The Hill's right in the middle, Wall Street Journal's on the right, and Washington Post on the left. A lot of the stuff I have a paywall myself for the Washington Post, but I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. So here's another good thing. We've got about a minute, but this is a good one that I found, where Elon Musk reposted something about party affiliation is now entirely correlated with trust in MSM. Republicans realize it's propaganda, blah, 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 blah. Americans trust in mass media. That's just Americans trust in mass media, depending on where the Democrats are. But same Axios, this is those who identify with the select political affiliation. Just how you twist the different abstracts of things. All right, I gotta go. So thank you for tuning in. Next week, I'll help you a little bit more organized and a little more rested. And yeah, have a good night.
Steve, I